Welcome, everyone. We're glad to have you with us virtually today. Safety first. Ensure your environment is safe, free from hazards, and comfortable for the duration of the event. Emergency awareness. Know how to quickly exit the virtual platform or disconnect if necessary. Stay ready. Have your emergency contact information and important documents easily accessible in case of any situation. Health and well-being. Take breaks as needed. Stay hydrated and follow any local health guidelines for your area. Stay safe, stay ready, and enjoy the event.
Greetings and welcome to the Show Me the Money webinar. I'm Deirdre Peters, president of the Annapolis Alumni Chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, and I'm excited to have you join us tonight for this important session in collaboration with the Maryland Higher Education Commission, Anne Arundel Community College, and our Scholarship Committee. This webinar aligns with our chapter's commitment to Delta Sigma Theta's 5-point programmatic thrust, with a special focus on educational development and economic development. We know that understanding the financial aid process is essential to opening doors to higher education, and tonight's session is all about equipping you with the knowledge and resources to do just that. With expert speakers guiding us through the FAFSA scholarships and state funding options, this session represents a collective effort to empower students and families to make informed decisions and overcome financial obstacles. This collaboration is more than sharing information. It's about creating opportunities and fostering lasting success. We appreciate you joining us for this impactful event, and we're excited to see the outcomes of tonight's discussion. Let's get started.
Good evening. I'm Veronica Barrier-Williams, and I'd like to go over the objectives for tonight. But before I do that, thank you, President Peters, for that warm and informative welcome. Tonight, we will explain different ways to pay for college, including federal, state, and institutional aid. Introduce various scholarship opportunities available to students. Discuss the FAFSA process. Explore Maryland State financial aid programs. Provide an opportunity for students or for attendees to ask questions.
Wow, thank you so much. It sounds like we have a lot to cover tonight. It is my pleasure to introduce both of our speakers for the evening. Our first speaker is Alexia Simmons. She is an outreach specialist at the Maryland Higher Education Commission, affectionately known as MHEC. Ms. Simmons brings a wealth of experience in higher education funding and is deeply committed to improving access, equity, and success for students across the state of Maryland. She will be sharing ways to obtain Maryland aid to pay for college. Our second speaker tonight is Mr. Michael McGranahan. He is the coordinator of financial aid at Anne Arundel Community College. Mr. McGranahan will be guiding us through various other ways to pay for college. With his vast experience in higher education finance, he will be able to share ways students and families can navigate through FAFSA and the various financial aid options. We are asking tonight that if you have any questions for either of the speakers, that you put them in the chat. We will address them in a Q&A after both speakers have finished tonight. please join me again in welcoming our first speaker, Ms. Alexia Simmons.
Everyone, thank you so much for tuning in this evening. I hope you all can take away a lot of good information, especially if you're interested in attending a career school, community college, or even a four-year university in the state of Maryland specifically. We have a lot of amazing programs available for students. You can be a high school senior graduating to go on to secure your post-secondary degree or certificate, or you can currently be in college as well. Next slide, please. So first, I'm going to give you a little bit of background information about the Maryland Higher Education Commission. We have over 25 different financial aid programs at our agency. We are a state agency for the state of Maryland. So essentially, our programs are scholarships and grants, and it's essentially money that helps students pay their tuition and make school more affordable. These funds can be used for books, tuition, room and board, clothing, food, many of the educational expenses that you will incur during your journey. This funding is available for that. So we have our Office of Student Financial Assistance within MHEC, and each year there is 130 million available to students. So this is through our scholarships, our grants, and then we also have loan assistance repayment programs as well. Next slide. So tonight I'm going to spend a little bit of time discussing financial aid if you're not familiar, some of the different sources and types of financial aid, and then we'll discuss how to apply for aid and a little more information about the programs we have available within MHEC. Next slide. So financial aid, if you're not familiar, is money that you can use to help pay for college, career school, or a four-year university. Again, you could use these funds for many expenses to cover your educational expenses, but really the goal is to help cover costs so that you're paying less out of pocket and having less to worry about, less challenges financially to pay for school so that you can focus on your studies, essentially. Next slide. So when we speak about the different sources and types of financial aid, there are grants and scholarships, which I am speaking to you all about today. Grants and scholarships are gifted aid, which means you typically do not have to pay these funds back. With grants and scholarships, students are typically awarded based off of merit, extracurricular activities. If you're into sports, certain hobbies, you can obtain a scholarship for. Your grades, it really just depends. And then there are also opportunities for funding based off of your demonstrated financial need, which we'll talk about as well. With work study employment, I definitely recommend if you're eligible. We'll discuss a little bit more about this as well when we talk about the FAFSA, which stands for the Free Application for Federal Student Aid. This is an opportunity that is available to some students if they are eligible, where you can work part-time while you are doing your studies. But the goal essentially is to get that experience in the real world, and with the understanding that you can complete your assignments during your downtime and really just kind of mesh the two together, those theories you're learning, those experiences in the classroom. You'll also be able to get that practical experience as well. With loans, we do tell our students to borrow wisely. With loans, there is an understanding that you must pay those funds back, and typically there is interest, a certain time frame to pay those funds back. Today, I'm talking to you all about scholarships and grants. So some of the sources for these types of opportunities would be the federal government. When we speak about the FAFSA, that is the federal government. When we speak about state financial aid for the state of Maryland, that will be the Maryland Higher Education Commission. When we speak about institutional aid, this essentially means the college or the school that you're interested in applying to, or perhaps the school that you have already been admitted to. A lot of times colleges, career schools, they have different programs and money available to students for them to apply separately outside of the sources that I'm going to talk to you about today. And then, of course, some other sources of aid would include sororities, faith-based institutions, other nonprofit organizations, for example, the College Bound Foundation. There are many other scholarship opportunities. Be sure to vet and make sure that these opportunities are legit. But typically with these opportunities, there are merit-based opportunities and based off of your need, your demonstrated need in your household. Next slide. So this is one of the main things. If you take anything away from this webinar this evening, it would be definitely, if you need to do anything first, of course, apply to your schools, see what you're interested in if you haven't been admitted already. But you need to get started if you really want to leverage financial aid. These funds, you need to complete your free application for federal student aid, also known as the FAFSA. This is the key step because a lot of colleges, the state of Maryland, any organization, typically when you are applying for a scholarship, oftentimes they will ask for the FAFSA. The deadline for Maryland students to submit that FAFSA for priority consideration is March 1st, 2025. So you want to write that down, make a note of that. That deadline is approaching quickly. Now, it doesn't mean after the deadline you're not eligible to apply or submit your FAFSA form. It just means that you get priority consideration. So all students who apply, who submit their FAFSA and apply to our scholarship programs, which I'll get into a little bit later, if you do all of that before March 1st, you submit your FAFSA March 1st, you will be evaluated with that priority funding first to see what aid you're eligible for. So to get started with your FAFSA, you're going to visit studentaid.gov, and this form you must submit each year as a student in college. Next slide, please. So this is what you'll see, a similar view when you visit the FAFSA website. It is important to note that eligible non-citizens can complete a FAFSA. There are a lot of resources available on studentaid.gov if you're unfamiliar with the FAFSA or just financial aid in general. They have a YouTube outreach channel. They are very active on social media, as well as MHEC. We post a lot of FAFSA tips and information as well. But this is definitely the first step to get started, to become familiar with the FAFSA process and what you need to do. One of the first things, of course, is to create your studentaid.gov account. You want to do that as soon as possible because it can take up to 3 days to process. And of note with this FAFSA, I really just want to emphasize when you do apply, be sure to at least include one Maryland college or university or career trade school on your form. It just makes the whole process very seamless, especially if you are planning to attend a Maryland institution. So just don't count yourself out, even if you feel like you want to go out of state. Explore as many options as possible. Include a Maryland college, whether it's a community college, a university, or a trade school on your form. Next slide, please. So the MHEC One app. Now, this is the second thing that's very important. So this is basically our application for MHEC. So similar to the FAFSA for the federal government, this MHEC One app is where students will go when we release our different scholarship programs, which I'll get into in the next slide here. But basically, you have to create your MDCAPS account. So this is the larger portal for Maryland students. It stands for Maryland College Aid Processing System. So you need basic information similar to the FAFSA portal. You need your name, date of birth, and that type of information, your contact information. Once you get set up on the portal and you create your MDCAPS account, the MHEC One app is located within the portal. Any Maryland student, I feel, should really create their MDCAPS account, especially if you are going to school in the state, because oftentimes, even if you reach out to your legislators and get scholarships that way, if you get scholarships from your school that you're attending, oftentimes they do send the money to MHEC and you have to approve your funds through this portal anyway. So whether or not you're applying for our specific scholarships, even still, if you're getting money from other organizations, they may still be using this portal as well. So the second option for students who cannot or are not eligible for FAFSA, meaning you are not eligible for federal financial aid, you may still be eligible for state financial aid. So for instance, if you are from a mixed status family, you are an undocumented student, you may still be eligible for state aid from MHEC, even if you're not eligible for aid from the FAFSA form. So you would get started to submit your information through the MHEC One app as well. And then you can also apply for the additional scholarships we have available in that portal as well. So if you have any questions about the MHEC One app, this is a lot of times where a lot of those questions come in. Be sure to document that, put it in the chat so we can address it at the end. But really, the MHEC One app and the FAFSA is key to all of these opportunities. Next slide. So with the MHEC One app, to be eligible, you must be a Maryland resident, have graduated from a high school in the state, or receive the equivalent of a high school diploma in the state. You must have tax return information from the past 3 years. And when you are in school, you must have tax information every year afterward while enrolled. And sometimes students may have to sign an affidavit attesting that they meet these requirements. Next slide. So this is what you'll see when you type in Google MDCAPS portal, so you can set up your MDCAPS account after you set up your studentaid.gov account. So again, students must create their account. And when you are awarded financial aid, so if you are awarded a scholarship, a lot of times there is a turnaround time requirement. You must accept or decline your awards within a 2-week time frame, or you risk losing that money to someone else. So definitely get started on that portal, get your account set up. This is a URL here. And yeah, this is pretty much a screenshot of what you'll see when you go to the portal. Next slide, please. So now we're going to get into some of the aid programs that we have. So we have, again, like I mentioned, over 25 different scholarship and grant programs. These are just a few that I'm going to get into, and then I'll elaborate a little bit more for some of these, but I'm going to go through a little bit quickly to give you an overview. With the Guaranteed Access Grant, this is for our low-income families. This is a need-based opportunity where students can be eligible to receive up to $20,000 with this. The senatorial and delegate scholarships from the legislators have a little bit of a unique process, but again, it goes hand in hand with our process. Students reach out directly to their legislators, and if they are awarded, everything is done through that MDCAPS portal, as I mentioned prior. With the 2+2 transfer scholarship, this opportunity is available for students who know maybe they want to start out at a community college. Maybe that's more affordable for you. It meets your need for your specific goals. Maybe that's the type of environment you feel like you'll thrive in. If you are a student who wants to start out at a community college, there are funds available for you to obtain a scholarship. So go ahead and finish your studies at a 4-year university. So you must obtain that associate's degree at the community college level, and then you could apply to transfer and finish your remaining 2 years to obtain that 4-year bachelor's degree at a 4-year university. With the Richard W. Collins III Leadership with Honor Scholarship, this opportunity is for students who are attending a Maryland historically Black college or university, so an HBCU, and also in an ROTC program, receiving military training as a student. With the Teaching Fellows for Maryland Scholarship, this is a very popular scholarship within our organization. There is an urgent need for educators in the state of Maryland and nationwide. So if you are interested in teaching children and youth, especially in public schools, this is an opportunity for you to get 100% of your room and board, tuition, and mandatory fees covered. Again, 100% of room and board, mandatory fees, and your tuition covered in exchange for a public service obligation. It's not forever. For every year that you renew this scholarship, if you are an undergrad student, you serve 1 year in a public school as a public school teacher. And if you are a graduate student who is awarded this and you renew this, you serve 2 years for each time that you renew the scholarship. With the Teachers Human Services Scholarship, this is supposed to say the Human Services Career Scholarship, but this is essentially for students who are interested in social work, really just changing the lives of children and families. If you're interested in child welfare, adult welfare, and those types of concerns, public benefits and helping families secure those food benefits and medical assistance and things of that nature, this is an opportunity for you to get, I believe this one may cover 100% of the tuition. It may not cover the room and board, but again, that's pretty substantial money that you can allot to your fund, to your schooling, and use your own money for something else. So that's a great opportunity there. We have the Maryland Police Officer Scholarship Program. This is also for current police officers and probation agents if they are interested in professional development opportunities, and also those students who are graduating from high school and interested in law enforcement careers. So if you're studying a program in law enforcement, this opportunity may be for you. And then we have our Workforce Shortage Student Assistance Grant. So this covers many different industries, nursing, physical therapy, if you're interested in cybersecurity, HVAC, I believe some of those trade professions and certificates, this will cover that grant. And then at the bottom, we have our Maryland Community College Promise Scholarship, which is very popular for many students who attend community college. And I'll get a little bit more into that in the next slide. Next slide, please. So with our Community College Promise Scholarship, this is a last dollar scholarship available each academic year to students who are attending a Maryland community college. So the award amount is up to $5,000, meaning a student may be eligible to receive up to that amount. And it being a last dollar scholarship means this scholarship opportunity will come in after all other funding. If you had other grants or scholarships or other funding to contribute to your education, once all of that is deducted, if you have a remaining balance, this scholarship will come in to cover the remaining balance up to $5,000 or to whatever that amount you were awarded. So really key to mention here is to create your MD Caps account and to file that FAFSA by March 1st. If you're not eligible to do the FAFSA, then you would submit your information on the MHEC One app so that MHEC has it so we can see what state aid you're eligible for. The deadline for that, again, is March 1st each year. You want to be sure to indicate a Maryland Community College on your FAFSA application and to submit your required documents by the deadlines. There may be some additional documents required, so be sure to check your email address, use up-to-date information. That's one of the primary ways that you'll be getting communication regarding awards and financial aid opportunities. Next slide, please. With the Guaranteed Access Grant, I mentioned this previously, but it is a need-based grant. So this is for those students who demonstrate that financial need. This grant will equal 100% of the student's financial need, up to $20,000. Key theme here, again, is to file your FAFSA or MHEC One app by March 1st each year to be first in line to be considered for this type of opportunity. You must include that Maryland College or university on your FAFSA form to be considered for this as well. And with a lot of these need-based opportunities, just including that Maryland College is really crucial because a lot of times we can automatically see the state of Maryland based off what's submitted on the FAFSA. When you indicate a Maryland College, they transfer information to the state. So if you don't include that crucial information, you may have to go back and add it later, which of course it may include additional challenges. So it's just pretty much a seamless process for MHEC to receive your information if you initially include that Maryland College or career school on your form, that FAFSA form initially. So I really just want to emphasize that to you all. Next slide. With the Human Services Career Scholarship that I mentioned previously, there really is an urgent need for professionals who are dedicated and committed to child support, family services, and social work. Essentially, if you are interested in helping children and families, vulnerable populations like older adults, this is the opportunity for you to get 100% of your tuition and mandatory fees covered if you are eligible. Again, there is a service obligation to work with the Department of Human Services for 15 months each year that you renew that scholarship. And I do want to mention that these positions are targeted in Baltimore City, Baltimore County, and Prince George's County. Next slide, please. With the Police and Probation Officer scholarship, again, this is available to high school students going to college, interested in law enforcement. It's open to current officers as well. The annual award is 50% of the equivalent annual tuition for this opportunity, and it is open to full-time and part-time students. Next slide. So with the legislative scholarships, again, I want to mention it is available to high school seniors. You can even be in college currently, part-time or full-time. You can be a graduate student as well. You can also be attending a private career school or trade school. Even with the legislative scholarships, as you see here, you do need your FAFSA or MHEC One app submitted by March 1st. Next slide. So with these legislative scholarships, it's a really good opportunity to get large amounts of money, significant amounts for your education. And I say that because typically, depending on the jurisdiction you live in, you may have more than one state delegate. You typically have one senator, of course. And with these scholarship opportunities, each one you're eligible, you may be, basically the maximum is up to $12,000 each. So if you have 3 or 2 delegates in your jurisdiction, it's an opportunity to apply to both of those delegates for their scholarships and receive up to $12,000 each, potentially, for those opportunities. So what you want to do is you're going to visit www.mdelect.net. You're going to type in your address and a list will populate of all of your elected officials. And what you're going to do, you're going to take that contact information, the number, and you're going to give them a call. They're very familiar with the process. They want to assist students and award the scholarship money. It really just simply is calling and asking about their scholarship packet, getting that information sent to you, and submitting the required documentation within the time frame allotted to you before the deadline. You may have to write an essay for these opportunities. So definitely honed in on your skills and your interest. and be ready to articulate that to your legislators and hope to be awarded some financial aid funding. Next slide. A key resource here, if you are not experiencing these circumstances, you can also share this information with your peers, your family, and your community. But this is definitely very crucial for students who are experiencing homelessness in foster care, and for our students who have disabilities. We want them to know that there is an opportunity to get their tuition waived at the institutional level, meaning when they reach out to the college that they are attending, the school they're attending, there's an opportunity to get that tuition waived. MHEC does have information and resources for students. Again, this will be awarded by the school, but we can also assist and provide information for students. We do have a dedicated webpage to assist students experiencing these types of circumstances, and you can visit the QR code there. It's also available on the main website as well at mhec.maryland.gov. And another thing I wanted to mention regarding the FAFSA and these unique populations, unaccompanied students in unstable housing and youth experiencing foster care can complete their FAFSA or MHEC One app as independent students. So this means you don't need parental signatures or income information to move forward. Next slide. If you want to stay up to date with any relevant news about higher education in Maryland, what scholarship programs are opening, a lot of our scholarship programs, I didn't mention previously that FAFSA is due by March 1st. And a lot of these scholarship programs that I mentioned in the presentation, they open up March 1st and after March 1st for students to begin applying. So if you have questions about that, put that in the chat as well. But if you want notifications, definitely visit the website at mhec.maryland.gov. When you scroll to the bottom of the webpage, you will see this yellow box, and you can submit either your phone number or your email address, whatever you're comfortable with, to receive notifications whenever we send messaging out. Next slide. This is another option to stay in the know, social media, where you typically see the most up-to-date information instantaneously, a lot of videos and information in very easy to understand language for students and families. Definitely recommend starting with Facebook and Instagram to become familiar with the FAFSA, become familiar with Maryland financial aid and the resources available to you. Next slide. And this is one of the most important slides I will present to you, because if you have any issues with your financial aid applications or your awards, you will reach out to our Office of Student Financial Assistance. You can give them a call as well. That contact information is on the main website at mhec.maryland.gov. You can also schedule a virtual meeting with a financial aid specialist. So if you have those very specific questions about your unique circumstances, you want a little bit of one-on-one support, you can request a virtual meeting with a specialist. Also, if you have any issues with the MDCAPS portal, this is who you will submit your concerns to as well for resolution. Next slide. Thank you so much. This is all I have for you today. I hope this was really helpful, at least to get started. Definitely visit the website, visit social media, and drop your questions in the chat. And I look forward to answering them at the end of the presentation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Simmons. Very good information. So I just want to take a minute to share with you 2 scholarships that the Annapolis Alumni Chapter of Delta Sigma Theta sorority offers. The first one is our Outstanding Scholar Award. The application deadline for that is March 17th. To be eligible, you have to be a resident of Anne Arundel County and attend a high school in Anne Arundel County, be a graduating African-American high school senior in the class of 2024, have a GPA of at least 3.0, and plan to pursue post-secondary education in an accredited 4-year program. We do have multiple scholarships that we'll award in this category. There's also our single parent continuing education scholarship. That due date is the same, March 17th. To be eligible for that scholarship, you must be a graduating high school senior, class of 2025, or a high school graduate, or have a GED diploma. You must also plan to attend a community college, vocational school, or accredited 4-year institution. You must be a resident of Anne Arundel County, and you also have to have a GPA of at least a 2.75. So those are the two scholarships that we offer. I'm going to introduce to you again our next guest, Mr. Michael McGranahan. As a reminder, Mr. McGranahan is the coordinator of financial aid customer service at Anne Arundel Community College. So, Mr. McGranahan, we welcome you, and I will now turn it over to you to present ways to pay for college.
All right, thank you so much for inviting me. I'm hoping everyone can hear me okay. Thank you, Ms. Sims. That was actually amazing. So I might ask if I can steal some of your slides. I hopefully won't have too much crossover, but there's quite a lot. I'm going to go ahead and start. I apologize in advance that I might kind of click through slides because, again, Ms. Sims has done a great job of already covering a lot of it, and try to get to the important points that I haven't, such as what is financial aid. Again, it's pretty much any money that you can get that provides the student and the family's help to pay for post-secondary educational expenses. And as she pointed out, this doesn't necessarily mean college. There's also vocational schools and trade schools that are also eligible for this financial aid, both through the federal government, institutional, and state. Next slide, please. So this looks very familiar. The reason I have this slide is because, again, the four sources of financial aid, we're staying on track here: federal, state, institutional, and outside aid. This is the big stress that federal aid, you complete the FAFSA. State aid, you need to complete the FAFSA or the MISFA if you're not eligible. And then institutional aid, you pretty much have to complete the FAFSA as well. Outside aid is different. Those are all those outside scholarships, different tuition assistance through employers and things like that. Those typically do not require the FAFSA. Go to the next slide. What is the FAFSA? Now, there was a question that popped up asking on the thing, what's the household limit to receive FAFSA? The FAFSA itself is not an award. It is an application. It stands for the Free Application for Federal Student Aid. So first thing, it's free. So never ask, if anyone asks you for money during this process, run away. Every part of it should be free. And also what it does is they take all of this information, the demographic and financial information, and they number crunch it down into one number, which is, they now call it the Student Aid Index. Before they call it the estimated family contribution. So basically, this is what the federal government, in their infinite wisdom, believes that the family can put towards their students' education. We all know that that may or may not actually be true to form, but they basically create this number to define financial need. And that financial need is what tells the state and the schools and the federal government, how much aid the student should be eligible for. It's not a guarantee, but again, the FAFSA itself is not the aid. It's just basically creating an index so that they know how and how much to award you. For the federal government, the aid is actually usually the Pell Grant, which is another type of grant, but there are other programs within there. The application is available in English and in Spanish, at least for now, and it will. The previous one actually did open up October 1st. They've done a transition. They introduced a new FAFSA last year. Believe it or not, it is simplified. It has gotten actually quite a bit better. It's one of those things where when it works so much better than it used to. When it doesn't, it works so much worse than it used to. But for the vast majority of people, it's actually much better. And we have heard that the 25-26 FAFSA will definitely be opening October 1st. But it can be filled out at any time during the year. And it goes every year by the academic year. So right now, we're in the 2024-25 academic year. You could still do the FAFSA for this year and get aid for the spring and the summer and such. You're not going to be eligible for a lot of institutional or state aid because those deadlines have passed, but you can still do the FAFSA and get federal aid. Now, the 25-26 FAFSA, which is for next fall and the spring of 2026, that's open right now too. And that's what the high school seniors, or the people who are going to graduate this year, that's the one they want to do right now, or definitely before March 1st. Next slide, please. The criteria, you must be a US citizen or eligible non-citizen. Ms. Simmons touched on that. There is a place you can go there on the studentaid.gov to see what eligible non-citizen means, but it pretty much means either permanent resident or asylee. Now, there are a bunch of smaller categories, but that's predominantly what they're talking about. You must have graduated high school or earned a GED or completed a state-approved homeschool program. And you must be enrolled in an eligible degree or certificate program at the college or trade school that you plan to attend. So those schools have to be approved. Next slide, please. As stated before, the login for the studentaid.gov is called your FSA ID. Now, 3 years ago, that was pretty much just a username and password. Now the FSA ID actually follows you around for life. And this is where you can go to see how much aid you've gotten, how many loans you've gotten. And, you know, later on when the loans go into repayment, you can go back and see what's going on there. So each student must create their own FSA ID, and then the parents must create their own FSA ID. And I say this because there's a lot of helicopter parents out there who are like, well, I'm going to put in my information, like my email and phone number, because I know that Johnny's not going to check on it. And then when they have this crossover, it can take a lot to unwind them if you have used the same phone number or email. I am going to take a quick moment as a public service announcement to the students and the parents that this is the point where the students really want to create a whole new email that's semi-professional, that's solely dedicated toward education and possibly work later on. Because when you get and start applying for scholarships and other things, you don't want to be sending it through an email that is, you know, sassypants3000@gmail.com. You want it to be semi-professional, but also you don't want to use the school's email. Right now, everyone has an email through AACPS. You don't want to use a school email because you might not have access to it. And you don't want to use an email that you're going to lose access to because, again, this is going to follow you around for quite a while. We have plenty of parents who did their own FAFSAs 10 years ago and are now signing in as the parent instead of the student using that same login information. So again, it's going to follow you around. So right now, if they haven't been done, the parents need to create their own FSA ID. And then the student also needs to create theirs. And again, as Ms. Simmons said, allow time for this because it can take up to 3 days for them to verify it. Because again, it's no longer just a username and password. They actually have other things attached to it, and it's a governmental login that's going to connect with other government agencies. Next slide, please. Getting started. We've seen the same thing here. When you log on, create the FSA ID, you can go up there to the FAFSA form. It's going to give you the option to do both forms. If you're a parent, you're not going to want to start this. The student's going to start the process. But the main thing here is when you go in, instead of having to enter all of your information now, your demographic information is going to be imported from the FSA ID. And then on top of that, you provide consent. And that's what allows them to bring in all of the tax information. And go to the next slide. So this is the basic steps. When I say we, this includes the NASFA, which is the National Financial Aid Association, as well as the FSA, encourage the student to be the one to drive the process. When you start the FAFSA, it asks, are you a student or are you a parent? You can start it as a parent, but there's a lot more potential for confusion when that happens, where are they answering for themselves? Are they answering for the student? It's recommended that the student starts it. You have both the FSA ID. Also, they take a screenshot of the demographic information from the parent FSA ID. Then the student completes their section. They invite the contributors, and the contributors are going to be, the parent who are basically, they used to call them custodial parents, but they do this wizard now where they tell you, okay, these are the people you're going to include. And you need to make sure that when you invite them, that the information on the information on the invitation matches the FSA ID of the person exactly. And the reason why I say that is that if they don't connect, it can cause problems. And I've seen it where the invitation says Michael McGranahan, where the FSA ID has Mike McGranahan, and for whatever reason, it doesn't connect. But just make sure they match. And then you provide consent to pull the IRS data. If at some point it starts asking you for the IRS data, enter it manually, something's kind of gone wrong and you don't want to be entering it manually. Well, sometimes it's just that 3-day delay. And then the student has the opportunity to review it, and then they can hit submit. So when the student, I'm going to go ahead and say, next slide, please. I'm not sure. When the student starts filling this out, this is where it's going to ask about other and unusual circumstances. Now, this is what, again, was mentioned earlier about homelessness or in danger of homelessness and things like that. And what would happen is the student would indicate here that they are either fall into one of these categories, and they would be given provisional independent status. And then when they get to the school's going to ask for documentation or make contact with them to find out, okay, what's your situation? How can we move forward, and make sure that it qualifies for that independent status. Unfortunately, a lot of students will think, well, I'm 20 years old, I work on my own, I pay my parents' rent, I'm independent. And unfortunately, that's not the way the federal government looks at it. So there's a whole series of questions that are asked initially. And if you don't fit into any of those categories, unfortunately, you're going to end up being considered dependent. Next slide, please. If the parent is unwilling or unable to provide information, this also can be checked, but it is a really bad scenario, and we encourage students to reach out to the school to see if we can help them. The parents have to be involved. Occasionally, parents will think, well, if I don't include my information, they'll only look at the student and they'll be eligible for more financial aid. Unfortunately, if a student is determined to be dependent and does not provide the parental information, they're basically not eligible for any real aid. They're not going to be able to get any federal grants. They're probably not going to be able to get any state unless they have some other way of demonstrating it. They're only going to be eligible for direct unsubsidized loans, which are the worst kind. So if any of you are considering not assisting your student, it is vital that the parents are involved in the process. Next slide, please. When the student invites the contributors, this is where they're going to basically provide this information, the names, date of birth, social security number, email, phone number, and then the parent will receive an email from fsa.gov saying, hey, Johnny has asked for your assistance, and we'll provide a link. The link will just take you directly to studentaid.gov and have you log in with your FSA ID, and there'll be a tile that says sign in as parent contributor. This is a confusion point for a lot of people because they'll sign in and then they'll start their own FAFSA. You have to make sure that you're going into the parent portion of it when you do this. Next slide, please. This is the email that gets sent and with the login and the link. Go ahead to the next slide. When you get to the end there of providing financial information, what's going to happen? This happens both with the student and with the parents. They import the information from the IRS, and then it's going to ask some questions about assets. Assets are basically, how much money you have in the bank. You put down whatever the minimum amount was at some point. It's not verified. Do you have stocks, bonds? The primary thing with assets is do not overthink them. It's simply the rule of thumb is, does it make you money or can it be turned into money very quickly? So your stocks and bonds and stock portfolio, that is an asset. Your retirement account that would get severely penalized if you took out money early, that's not considered an asset. Your house that you live in, that's not an asset, that's a liability. That beach house that you have in Rehoboth that you occasionally rent out, that is an asset. So that's the way to do it. And not everyone gets asked these questions depending on the income level that they provide. However, when you're doing the FAFSA, they're looking at the prior year for taxes. So for the 24-25 year, this current year, we're looking at the 22 taxes. For next year, for 25-26, they're going to be looking at your 2023 taxes. A lot can happen in 2 years. And especially over COVID, there's some just major changes. And, people get divorced, they, lose a job, they gain a job. They get a payout from a one-time payout for like an inheritance or a lottery winning or something, so that the taxes from 2023 do not reflect what the actual income is, especially at the current place. There is a place where afterwards where it asks, have you experienced any special circumstances? And if the student or the parent check that box, what will happen is that'll flag the FAFSA. So when it gets to the school's going to reach out and say, okay, what happened? You can't fight or argue or adjust it while you're doing the FAFSA. It's a computer, it doesn't care. So you're going to want to make sure that if you did have something happen, death in the family, divorce, loss of job, anything like that, check that box so that when they get to the school can have a specialist look at it and see if any changes or anything can be made to assist that student. Next slide, please. Once it's completed, and this is another big thing for the FAFSA, you need to make sure it actually gets completed. It will actually send you a confirmation email as well as an estimate. It's an estimate, it's not a guarantee, of the federal aid that the student might be eligible for, what their student aid index is, and then also during the course of the FAFSA, you can put down up to 20 different colleges that you want to go to. So it's going to give you information about those colleges. And again, as Ms. Simmons recommended, make sure that you put a Maryland school. And if they're from Anne Arundel Community County, put down Anne Arundel Community College. If you're a PG County, put down PG Community College. Not because you have any intention of going there, but just so that there's a local college that if you have questions, you can turn to, and they'll be able to see your student aid report and explain it to you if they need to. It's also just as a fallback. So it's already there, ready to go, because life happens. We also, and this is just the financial aid administrators, highly recommend that the student puts down their dream shot, that they don't discount that they can get to a school just because of the financial aspect, because you never know, and it's always worth it. But I'll get more into that in the next slide over, or a little bit later on. Next slide, please. All right, this is where I'm going to click through a whole bunch because it's already been covered. This is the MHAC login, the portal for the MDCAPS. Next slide. This is what the MDCAPS One App page looks like. Next slide. I don't have as much detailed information as she did. I'm going to have to ask again if I can steal some of her slides. Next slide, please. And she went over everything with the Maryland Promise Scholarship. Next slide, please. Okay, so you've got your FAFSA in. Now you're eligible for state aid. You got it in before March 1st, and you've created your MDCAPS login, and you're looking into all of the state aid on top of it. The third source of aid is institutional aid. And this, again, is really important, much more so when you start looking at four-year schools, especially four-year private schools, as well as some of those trade schools and such. And the reason being is the Pell Grant's going to be like maybe $7,000. I don't think they're changing it for next year, but that's for the entire year. So you're looking at $3,500 for each semester. And then you might get an additional federal grant of $2,000 on top of that. And then you might get an educational assistance grant. Even at this point, you're barely up to about $12,000. The cost of attendance at a community college for just tuition and fees is under $10,000. The actual cost of attendance is probably closer to $16,000. That's including room and board. But when you get to the four-year public schools, now we're jumping up to $24,000, $32,000, if not higher, if you're going out of state. And you've got a pretty big shortfall going on there now. You've got about $15,000. The four-year schools are the ones that have a lot more institutional aid. especially the private institutions. Those are the Harvards, the Princetons, the Browns that have, billion-dollar endowments. So you want to know going into those schools what their office wants and what their deadlines are. So for those seniors who are graduating this year, they really need to be knowing now if they've already gotten admitted, what the deadlines for that school's financial aid is, what their policies are. As said before, some of them are awarded as part of the scholarship application process. Some schools require what's called the CSS profile or some other type of application, which is basically a deeper dive into the parental finances and such. And they use that to award all of this institutional aid. Is it worth it going through all of this? Yes, it is. And the reason being is I used to call it an urban legend, but I've ended up having multiple people say that the same thing happened to them, where there was a student who applied for Penn State and Princeton. And when the dust settled, it was actually cheaper for them to go to Princeton because Princeton was willing to provide a lot more financial aid. If that college wants you, they're going to find the money, and you also can haggle with them. Maybe not successfully, but it doesn't hurt to go back and say, hey, I really want to go. Is there any way I can get additional aid because there's a shortfall here? One thing to say right now is up until this point, the parents are not on the hook for anything. If they fill out the FAFSA and they fill out the state aid and they fill out the stuff for institutional, all they're doing is providing information. They're not required to pay or do anything at this particular point. It's not going to show up on their credit reports or anything like that. And that's just, again, to reassure parents that they do need to be part of the process. Next slide, please. So I throw AACC up here, not because I want you guys to go there, but just sort of as an example. We're a community college. We have endowed scholarships. We have the foundation itself. Over 200 different scholarships. We award over $1 million annually. And you can complete one application, which is the AACC application. You just log on to as a student and fill it out. It asks a bunch of different questions, isolates and finds different scholarships for you. One of the things that we have are a whole bunch of scholarships for continuing education programs. These are the workforce development. A good chunk of that money actually comes from the state itself. The state of Maryland provides it so that students who are not necessarily destined for college or just are done being in a classroom but want to do carpentry, diesel mechanics, plumbing, HVAC techs, the money is there for them to go and get that training pretty much for free. They still have to go through the apprentice programs and do the testing, but that pathway is there. And we were talking to with the foundation about the continuing workforce and what's going on in that area, that field. And it turns out that most of the mastered, like electricians and HVAC people, are my age. They're in their mid-50s and they're aging out. They're going to be leaving the workforce relatively soon, and they're not being replaced. So those people in those blue-collar jobs are already making pretty good money, and there's going to be a seriously high demand for them coming up shortly in the next 5 to 10 years. Next slide, please. Okay, so we've covered the federal, state, institutional. The next one is the third-party scholarships, and this would include from sororities and things like that. When I go to the schools, that's where we talk about the different resources that are out there. High school counselors are the best, if possible. If you're using a homeschooling, they usually have a website or resources there. There are also free searches available at studentaid.gov. Basically, it's the same website that you go to for the FAFSA, but they have links to different search engines, as well as the U.S. Department of Labor has a free education or a free scholarship search tool. And then also there is a whole bunch of free service ones online, which I will show you on the next slide, but not yet. And it basically finds scholarships for you. There are literally thousands of scholarships out there, and there's thousands that go unawarded every year. So it's one of those things. Yes, there is a scholarship for tall people. Yes, there is a scholarship for left-handed people. There's all different kinds of scholarships that are out there. The best ones are to try to find ones that are sort of local, like your bank, the Kiwanis Club, whatever church you go to. There's all these different places that have them, and you just have to do the legwork to find them. And these can really make the difference. Now, granted, I ended up, going head to head with my own daughter over this, but if you fill out several, 50 applications, even only 5 of them come to fruition, that's could be up to, $20,000 in scholarships that you might not have otherwise had. So going to the next slide. We do not advocate for any of these particular ones. These are just names of ones that are out there. Some of them will spam you, like FastWeb. When I say spam you, what they'll do is you put in your information and they'll just start shooting emails saying, hey, here's a scholarship you might like. Here's a scholarship you might like. But they also have it where you can, say, I want scholarships that I don't have to turn in essays for. I want scholarships that, are just for specific, nursing students, things like that. As an administrator, we always recommend that you go for the ones that the students look at and go, yeah, that requires an essay. I don't want to do it. And the reason being is that means that half of the other students who look at it are doing the same thing. So instead of competing against 5,000 people, you're only competing against 500. In the previous slide, it mentions in there, that students could be creating an essay now. So if you have a student who's a junior this year, this coming summer is a really good time for them to be starting this, where they're looking for the scholarships in advance. They are writing up essays that can be then reread, reviewed by teachers, edited and reviewed by other people, so that when they do start submitting them, they're ready to roll. Also, this is when they should be lining up letters of recommendation and things like that, and creating their CV of, volunteer work and things like that, so that when they roll into the fall is like a very pivotal time for the seniors. It's horrible because they're doing applications, they've got their first last year of school and all that, but this is also the time where they really need to start looking into the outside aid and things like that. In terms of essays, a good place to start is there's something called the Common App, which college students are going to be using, where they can fill out one college application that goes to multiple colleges, a whole slew. And there's a choice of essays that they can write in that Common App, and the students can pick from them. And we recommend that, pick a couple of those essays and use those to write up the essays that you can then copy and paste into other scholarship applications. Next slide, please. Again, I'm second guessing why I usually have this at the very towards the end. Ms. Simmons had it at the very beginning in terms of the types of the financial aid, in terms of gifts, scholarships, and grants. These are ones you do not have to pay back. The grants are usually need-based, and that means that they're going off of that student aid index. Scholarships can be need-based, but they also might be merit or just by population. I mean,
It is 8:00 p.m.
Okay. Sorry about that. And then self-help aid is things like the loans, which again, we're not a huge advocate for, but they're not inherently evil when you're trying to make up that shortfall with what you've got with the grants and the scholarships. They're usually not need-based. Some of it is, some of it's not. They call it self-help because if it's a direct student loan, it's usually, a lower interest rate, but you do have to pay it back. Work study is actually awarded through federal aid. And what that does is if the student is awarded it, it means that the federal government is providing money for the college to employ students at the school, or sometimes doing charitable work outside the school, but it's through the school. And that way they can work at the school and earn a paycheck. That money does not go to the school as for tuition and fees. That money that is earned goes directly to the student. And this would be like, I hate to use the example because it dates me, but Good Will Hunting, where you have that student who gets a full ride scholarship to a school, but there's no work because it's a private school in a small town. So they're able to get a job at the college, working at the library, wherever, and earn the money to live off of while they're there. Other types of self-help aid also include some of these fellowship type programs, a teach grant, where I think it's a federal grant, but the student signs on to get this grant with the promise of providing work afterwards. So they're going to be committed to like 3 or however many years afterwards to get that scholarship or that grant. If they don't follow through, those grants typically get turned into unsubsidized loans. They end up having to pay it back. But by virtue of the fact that they are committing themselves to doing that work component after graduating, it turns it into what's called a self-help aid. Next slide, please. Student loans. Okay. Again, not inherently evil. We don't, not a big fan, because at my level, no one really should need them at this point, because community colleges are pretty cheap. However, when you're going to those 4-year schools, you've got to make up that difference. The main thing is do it wisely. If you are looking at doing loans, make sure that you understand it, and read the small print. Federal loans, at least in the past, have been better because there's more of a, you have the possibility of loan forgiveness, deferment, forbearance, and things like that. Subsidized loans are the better of the two. Those are the ones that do not accrue interest while the student is in school, but once they stop going to school, it starts accruing it. Unsubsidized start accruing interest right away. Now, a first-year freshman dependent student, the maximum amount of loans that they can get, subsidized and unsubsidized, is $5,500 for the year. So let's go back to that 12,000 we have in grants, and then you put the 5,500 on top of it. We're still basically just scratching over $20,000 for the year, for the entire year. And if you're going to a 4-year school where the cost of attendance is $32,000, you still have a shortfall. This is where the next step down is what's called direct parent plus loans. And this is where the parents can take out loans on top of what the student has. Again, up until this point, it's 100% on the student. Those subsidized and unsubsidized loans do not include the parents at all. The parents are not on the hook for them at all. If they take out the parent plus loans on top of that, that's when they start getting involved. The private loans, again, not inherently evil. They have their place, have different qualities to them. Again, some of them have some really good repayment options. It's best to do it through an institution that you're comfortable with. And this will involve the parents, because they're going to have someone co-signing on to it. There's no FAFSA required, which is why we see some people going for it, because they feel like that they're not going to be eligible for anything else. This is wrong, but they will. But sometimes they have to go this route anyways. That's all I got to say about that. Again, just be very wise and read the small print. Next slide, please. Be aware of other things that might be out there in terms of benefits that might be, transferable or otherwise. There's a lot of military benefits out there. The primary one right now would be either the Chapter 33, which is the post 9/11 GI Bill, and that's where the parents can actually pass those benefits down to their spouse and to their dependents as well as a Chapter 35, and that one goes to the dependents or survivors. So dependents of military personnel or veterans who are 100% disabled or who've passed away in combat or on duty, they could be eligible for that as well. So it's one of those, be aware of what the student might be eligible for. Next slide, please. And understanding the attending college, the direct costs and indirect costs. When I was talking about the cost of attendance, this is what they're talking about, because you have the tuition and fees. And a lot of the for-profit schools will, expound, our tuition is only $100 a credit hour, but then they have $200 a credit hour in fees. It's one of those knowing what the actual costs are, the room, books, room, and board. A lot of 4-year schools now have these like luxury condos for their room and board because they're trying to pull in people. Just be aware of the other costs of going to a particular school. And that also can just include cost of living in a particular area. So my director ended up having a daughter going to school over in Hawaii, and she got a scholarship to go there, but the cost of living was substantially higher and ended up costing even more just because of where it was and where it was located. So just be aware of the different costs, and there are websites that you can see this on, including studentaid.gov as well as College Avenue. Next slide, please. This is just basic best practices. You know, if you're in doubt, ask questions, reach out, know who your resources are. Again, Ms. Simmons put a great slide up there when it comes to MHEC. Check your email throughout the year. Again, recommend that the student has a dedicated email. And if they know they're not going to check it, or if the parent doesn't trust them to check it, you can always create that email and then have it auto forward to another email. And that way it can be monitored. If you're already going to school and something happens financially or otherwise, reach out to the school. The financial aid office is there to assist you. Start all of this early. So for those people who have students who are seniors now, it's not too late, but you really need to get the ball rolling like right now. If you have a student who is a junior this year, this summer is the time to really start looking at it. Different applications for scholarships, applications for schools, and doing the research of knowing when those deadlines are for the schools and for the particular scholarships. And then again, use the resources that are out there, be it guidance counselors, you know, older sister who's gone through school, reaching out to your local schools. You know, there are tons of resources out there. Next slide, please. This is basically informational. It has, you know, how do you apply? We again recommend that you would, if you're an Anne Arundel County resident, include Anne Arundel Community College. Not because you're planning on attending, but so that we're able to assist you if we need to. And next slide, please. This is talking about that last slide, resource. I should probably flip these two. One other thing that Ms. Simmons mentioned was the YouTube channel. The Federal Student Aid YouTube channel, it's FSA, is amazing. If you're working on the FAFSA, it has videos that give you every step of the way. So instead of a half-hour video walking you all the way through it, it chunks it out by section. And they do a much better job of explaining each step than I ever could. So we really recommend that if you're looking at doing the FAFSA, go watch the videos first so you know what to expect. Half of the fear of doing the FAFSA is simply just not knowing what to expect. They also have the Instagram, the Twitter. MHEC is a great one to follow as well. And I'm not just saying this because I want to make friends with Ms. Simmons, but because when we were going through everything last year with the new FAFSA, I follow all of these different sites, you know, federal, state, regional, and national financial aid administrators. MHEC actually had was the most proactive of putting information out there than many of them. And also one of the functions when you create your MDCAPS login and log on to that is that you can check your status of aid, and that includes what's going on with your FAFSA. So sometimes students have realized that they had an issue going on with their FAFSA by seeing it in the MDCAPS site, not through the FAFSA site. So I have gone way over my time already, I believe, and I appreciate everyone's patience and am here for any further questions.
Thank you, Mr. McGranahan, for that wonderful and informational presentation. Now I'll be looking at the chats and seeing the questions that we have at this time. Before I start looking at the chat questions, we have a post survey at the end of the presentation that we'd like everyone to complete. Now, the first question by Tracy Morgan was asked by Tracy Morgan, is there a household income limit to the received FAFSA?
Yeah, and that I kind of try to lead with that. The FAFSA itself is just the application. There is no household limit, and we seriously highly recommend Everyone does it, even if you don't think that you're going to be eligible to receive any aid because the family makes too much. You might not be eligible to receive Pell Grants or federal aid based on it. And I can't give you a flat number because it's based on the adjusted gross income and the number of people in the household and a bunch of different other factors. But even if you're not eligible for the federal aid, you still get that student aid index, and that establishes need. And when you're going to a community college and your student aid index is 30,000, well, you're not going to be eligible for any aid at the community college because your financial need there is no financial need. The cost of attendance is less than that SAI. However, if you're looking at a 4-year private school that has a cost of attendance of $72,000, you have a shortfall, and that's where institutional and other aid comes into play. So I can't provide the cutoff for the federal aid because, again, it depends on the different factors. They're looking at an SAI index of about 7,000. So if you have over 7,000, you're probably not going to be eligible for a Pell Grant, but that does not mean that you're not going to be eligible for a Promise Scholarship or an institutional award or anything like that. So everyone should do the FAFSA regardless, just so that they can get that student aid index because it opens up the door. If you don't do the FAFSA, you're not going to be able to get the Pell Grant, even if you were eligible. If you don't do it, you're not going to be eligible for any of the possible legislative scholarships or the Maryland Promise Scholarship. And you're also not going to be eligible to get anything through the state. So I know it's a non-answer, but basically just do the FAFSA.
All right, we had some other questions in here, but they already been answered.
Oh,
So
sweet.
yes, so like one question, I'm just gonna read one, then I'm gonna swing it to another, to Dawn. Are the legislative scholarships need-based? I think Ms. Simmons, you answered that. And you said there are opportunities that are need and merit-based.
Yeah, that all depends on the individual legislator themselves. They kind of, that's how that range of 200 to 12,000, they get a chunk of money, and the individual senator or delegate, they're the ones who determine how they're going to disseminate that money. And so that's why you need to contact the individual legislator's office to find out what they want, how they do it. Do they want an essay or whatever like that? So typically it does have a need component, but it's not even close to, the Pell Grant level. I mean, it's just basically demonstrating financial need itself is not difficult. It just depends on the range.
Okay. All right. Dawn, do you have any questions to answer?
I do. I have a question addressed to Ms. Simmons.
Ooh,
Alexia,
sorry.
are there any state financial aid options specifically for students already in college?
Specifically, I mean, all of our opportunities are available for students in college. You don't have to be specifically a high school senior. You can be a part-time undergrad student. You can be a graduate student now, currently. You can even be in the workforce now and looking for professional development opportunities. So these opportunities are available for a wide range of students and recipients.
Excellent. Thank you.
Wow, we have truly covered a lot tonight. The Annapolis Alumni Chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Incorporated, a sorority incorporated, wants to thank you so much for joining us tonight. We hope this webinar has been informative. If you would, please take some time to go over to the chat if you haven't already done so. A post survey has been linked there. You can copy the link and complete the survey now or when you get off the call. It will help us to understand how we've done tonight and how we can better serve you in the future. We also want to extend a special thanks to Ms. Simmons and Mr. McGranahan for showing us the money tonight. It's helping us to better understand how we can navigate this financial aid process, and we all know that we need that. Finally, please remember that the Annapolis Alumni Chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority is seeking candidates for our 2025 Outstanding Minority Scholar Scholarship and our 2025 Single Parent Continuing Education Scholarship. Remember, the deadline for applying is March 17th. The flyers are on the screen. You may scan the QR code to access the scholarship applications. You can also visit us at the web at www.annapolisalumnidst.org, where you can find them there. I am Nicole Pearsall. I am the scholarship chair. If you have any questions about these scholarships, please feel free to email me as well. My email is there as well. Thank you again so much for joining us tonight, and we hope that you have a great evening.